Let me ask you something. What kind of car survives for 20 years in the marketplace with just 16 horsepower, 3 wheels, and a body made of fiberglass? A car that weighs less than 900 pounds, tips over if you look at it wrong, and has all the performance of a riding lawnmower going uphill? The answer is the Reliant Regal. And here's what makes this story fascinating. This wasn't some curiosity that disappeared after a few months. No, the Regal was manufactured from 1953 all the way to 1973. That's 2 decades. 20 years of production for a vehicle that, by all conventional standards, shouldn't have lasted 20 minutes. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're sitting there, remembering the muscle car era, the chrome-laden beauties of Detroit, the thundering V8s that defined what an automobile should be, and you're asking yourself, why on earth would anyone build a 3-wheeled car with the power output of a sewing machine? But here's the thing, this wasn't built for America, this was built for post-war Britain, where the rules were different, the economics were different, and the very definition of what made a vehicle practical was entirely different. The Reliant Regal represents something we don't often think about in automotive history. Brilliant engineering born not from abundance, but from necessity. This is the story of how one British company turned legal loopholes, material shortages, and economic hardship into a vehicle that outlasted most of its better-equipped competitors. And along the way, it became one of the most recognized vehicles in British popular culture. So, settle in. Because what I'm about to tell you will change how you think about automotive ingenuity, durability, and what it really means for a vehicle to succeed. The origins. Born from austerity. To understand the Reliant Regal, you need to understand Britain in 1953. Picture this. The war had been over for 8 years, but Britain was still in what they called the age of austerity. Food rationing didn't fully end until 1954. Let that sink in. Nearly a decade after victory, British families were still using ration books to buy meat and sugar. The British government's debt-to-GDP ratio stood at approximately 200%. That's double what it is today. The Treasury was essentially bankrupt. American loans and Marshall Plan grants were keeping the economy afloat, but barely. The winter of 1947 had been so severe that secret government documents revealed contingency plans for mass starvation. This was the world into which the Reliant Regal was born. Tom Lawrence Williams founded Reliant Motor Company back in 1935 in Tamworth, England. Williams had previously designed the Raleigh Safety 7 3-wheeler, and when Raleigh abandoned car manufacturing, Williams saw an opportunity. He started Reliant to build simple, 3-wheeled delivery vans using motorcycle engines and front forks. These weren't cars in the traditional sense. They were utilitarian workhorses designed to navigate the narrow streets of British towns while skirting motorcycle licensing laws. By 1952, Williams was ready to expand. He wanted to build a passenger car, not just commercial vans. The result was unveiled at the 1952 motorcycle show. Note, motorcycle, not motor car. This was deliberate. The Reliant Regal was classified as a tricycle under British law because it weighed under 700 weight, or 355 kilograms. Here's why that mattered. Under British law, you could drive a 3-wheeled vehicle on a motorcycle license. No expensive car license required. Better yet, road tax was only £5 per year. £5. Compare that to standard automobile tax, and you begin to see the genius. For working-class British families emerging from wartime austerity, this wasn't just transportation, it was affordable transportation. The original 1953 Regal had an aluminum body mounted on a wooden frame, all sitting on a steel box section chassis. Under the hood, or bonnet, as the British say, was a 747 cubic centimetre side valve, water-cooled engine derived from the legendary Austin 7. Output? 16 horsepower at 4,000 revolutions per minute. Top speed? 60 miles per hour. Fuel consumption, around 50 miles per gallon. Now, 16 horsepower sounds laughable today. But context is everything. This was Britain in the 1950s. Petrol was expensive. Roads were narrow. Most families couldn't afford any car at all. The Regal offered 4-seater transportation, weather protection, better than a motorcycle and sidecar combination, and running costs that wouldn't bankrupt a working man. The purchase price was £362. To put that in perspective, the average British home in 1953 cost around £1,800. A standard four-wheeled car would run you closer to £500 or £600, plus the higher licensing costs, plus the higher road tax, plus worse fuel economy. The Regal's economics made sense in ways that transcended its modest specifications. Technical specifications, innovation through limitation. Let's talk about what made the Regal tick, because this is where the engineering gets interesting. Remember, this is 1953. Fiberglass as an automotive material is still experimental. Most manufacturers are working with steel and aluminum. But Reliant is about to pioneer something revolutionary, not because they're visionaries, but because economics forces their hand. The early Mark I and Mark II Regals used aluminum bodies. Aluminum was lighter than steel, which helped keep the weight down for that critical motorcycle classification. But here's the problem. During the 1950s, aluminum prices skyrocketed across Europe. What had been an economical choice suddenly became expensive. Most manufacturers would have switched to steel, accepting the weight penalty. Panhard in France did exactly that. But Reliant made a different choice. They started experimenting with glass fiber, what we call fiberglass today. Panel by panel, they replaced aluminum with fiberglass. By 1956, the Mark III Regal featured a completely fiberglass body. This was pioneering work. Reliant became industry experts in fiberglass manufacturing, while most of the automotive world was still treating it as a novelty. The genius here wasn't just cost savings. Fiberglass was lighter than steel, so the Regal retained its weight advantage. Lighter weight meant they could continue using smaller, cheaper, more economical engines. It was a virtuous cycle. Lower weight meant better fuel economy, which meant lower operating costs, which meant the Regal remained competitive in a market where every penny mattered. The engine itself tells another story of clever engineering. That original 747 cubic centimeter side valve unit wasn't cutting-edge technology even in 1953. Side valve engines were already being superseded by overhead valve designs in most applications. But side valves were simpler, easier to maintain, and more reliable. For a company targeting budget-conscious buyers, reliability trumped performance every time. Reliant's own redesign of the Austin 7 engine produced 17.5 horsepower, a significant improvement over Austin's original 10.5 horsepower from the same displacement. How did they do it? Better combustion chamber design, improved breathing, tighter manufacturing tolerances, nothing revolutionary, just good engineering applied systematically. This was Reliant's approach throughout. Take proven technology, refine it, make it work better within tight constraints. The chassis was equally pragmatic. Steel box section construction, nothing fancy, nothing complex. A single wheel up front handled steering. 2 wheels at the rear provided drive. The front suspension used a modified motorcycle-style system with coil springs. The rear had a simple live axle with leaf springs. Everything was designed for ease of repair using common tools. In post-war Britain, where most people did their own mechanical work, this accessibility was crucial. Weight distribution was perhaps 70% on the rear wheels, which meant decent traction for that modest power output. The downside, well, that's where the Regal earned its reputation. Put all the weight in the back, put all the power on those rear wheels, and give it just one wheel up front for steering. What could possibly go wrong? We'll come back to that. By 1962, Reliant introduced the Mark VII, codenamed TW7, 3-wheeler 7. This model represented a major redesign. the wooden frame was gone entirely, replaced by reinforced fiberglass unitary construction bonded to a steel chassis. Reliant had also developed their own overhead valve aluminum engine, initially 598 cubic centimeters producing 24 horsepower. Later versions got a 701 cubic centimeter engine producing approximately 30 horsepower. 30 horsepower. Still not much by American standards, but remember, this car weighed around 900 pounds fully loaded. That's a power-to-weight ratio not entirely terrible for city driving. 0 to 30 miles per hour came quickly enough for British traffic conditions. Top speed crept up to around 70 miles per hour for the later models, though you'd need considerable bravery to actually achieve it. The marque evolution, constant refinement. The Regal's 20-year production run wasn't static. Reliant continuously refined the design through multiple marque designations, each representing incremental improvements that kept the vehicle competitive in an evolving market. The Mark II arrived in 1954, distinguished primarily by an updated windshield. Not revolutionary, but it improved visibility and showed Reliant was listening to customer feedback. The Mark III in 1956 brought the complete fiberglass body. This was the watershed moment when Reliant's mastery of the material became apparent. Mark IV came in 1958, Mark V in 1959, and Mark VI in 1960. Each iteration brought small improvements, better sealing, improved trim, more robust mechanical components. The Mark V added 8 inches to the body length to create a proper boot, trunk for you Americans, because customers wanted luggage space. It also introduced tubeless tires and dual windscreen wipers. Small things, but they mattered. The Mark VI became the bestseller of the early generation, with 12,030 units produced between 1960 and 1962. That included 8,478 saloons and 3,052 vans. Those production numbers tell you something important. The Regal was selling, not in Ford or Chevrolet volumes obviously, but steadily, consistently, profitably. The jump to the Mark VII in 1962 represented Reliant's confidence in the design. By this point, they'd learned everything about building three-wheelers. The new overhead valve engine they developed was lighter and more powerful than the old side valve unit. The unitary fiberglass construction eliminated the wooden frame that required maintenance and was susceptible to rot. Everything about the Mark VII said, "We know what we're doing now." Reliant introduced model designations based on wheels and horsepower. The 3/25 indicated 3 wheels and 25 horsepower, while the 3/30 meant 3 wheels and 30 horsepower. They even offered a 21E model with 21 factory extras: spotlight, fog light, chrome bumper overriders, sun visors, oil gauge, wheel trims, and metallic paint. These weren't high-performance options, they were comfort and convenience features that made the Regal feel less utilitarian. On April 25, 1968, Reliant sales director T.H. Scott personally drove the 50,000th Regal 3/25 off the assembly line at Reliant's Tamworth plant. 50,000 units. That's not a small number for a specialized vehicle in a relatively small market. It demonstrated that Reliant had found their niche and exploited it successfully. Market reception and cultural impact. Now here's what's fascinating about the Regal. It succeeded despite, or perhaps because of its limitations. The British public understood what the Regal was. Nobody bought one thinking they were getting a Jaguar or even a Morris Minor. They bought it because it made economic sense. The motorcycle license requirement actually worked in Reliant's favor. Thousands of British motorcyclists wanted weather protection without graduating to full automobile licensing and taxation. The Regal offered exactly that transition vehicle. Young drivers could upgrade from a motorcycle and sidecar while staying within their license category. Small business owners loved the supervan variants. The three-wheeler classification meant lower operating costs, and the fiberglass body meant no rust, a significant advantage in Britain's damp climate. Delivery drivers, mobile repairmen, and tradespeople found the Regal's maneuverability perfect for narrow streets and tight parking situations where a full-size van would struggle. But let's address the elephant in the room: the handling. Or more accurately, the lack thereof. The Regal had a reputation for tipping over. This wasn't urban legend, this was physics. Single front wheel, narrow track, high center of gravity. Take a corner too enthusiastically and you'd find yourself staring at the sky while the Regal settled onto its side like a tired dog. British culture embraced this quirk with characteristic humour. The Regal became a symbol of British eccentricity, appearing in countless comedy sketches and sitcoms. The most famous example? The yellow supervan driven by Del Boy and Rodney Trotter in Only Fools and Horses. That show ran for decades, and that three-wheeler became as much a character as the humans. Younger viewers might remember Mr. Bean's ongoing feud with a light blue Regal supervan, which he regularly tipped over, crashed into, or bumped out of parking spaces. This cultural prominence did something interesting. It made the Regal famous in ways that pure transportation success never could. People who never owned one, who never even sat in one, knew what a Reliant Regal was. It became part of British identity, an automotive footnote that punched far above its weight in cultural impact. One of the original TV Regals sold at auction in 2007 for over £44,000. Another went for similar money more recently. These prices far exceed the vehicle's practical value, reflecting instead their cultural significance. That's remarkable for a car that originally cost a few £100s. Production numbers and longevity. Let's talk numbers because they tell the durability story better than anything else. The early Marks 1 through 6, spanning 1953 to 1962, produced approximately 25,000 units. That's a steady output for a small manufacturer selling a specialized vehicle. The 3/25 series, produced from 1962 to 1969, achieved around 50,000 units manufactured. That 50,000th vehicle milestone in 1968 represented real success. Compare that to many conventional British car companies that failed during the same period. British Motor Corporation, Roots Group, even proud names like Armstrong Siddeley and Alvis either disappeared or got absorbed into larger companies. But Reliant kept building three-wheelers. The Regal gave way to the Robin in 1973, and Reliant continued manufacturing three-wheeled vehicles into the 2000s. That kind of longevity speaks to something fundamental. They found a market, served it well, and didn't overreach. The Regal's durability in service is harder to document precisely. Unlike American cars with well-documented high-mileage examples, British three-wheelers weren't typically preserved or their mileage recorded. But anecdotal evidence suggests the Regal was remarkably reliable within its design parameters. The simple side valve engine could run for years with minimal maintenance. The fiberglass body never rusted. The straightforward mechanical components were easy to repair. Owners report that a well-maintained Regal would provide years of faithful service. The engine might need rebuilding after high mileage, but the rest of the vehicle could soldier on indefinitely. Fiberglass panels could crack but were easily repaired. The steel chassis might rust, but it was simple enough to repair or replace sections. The very simplicity that made the Regal seem primitive also made it durable. The economic reality, why it worked. Here's what we need to understand. The Regal succeeded because Britain in the 1950s and 60s was not America. While Americans were buying Chevrolet Bel Airs and Ford Fairlanes, British families were still emerging from wartime privation. Real income didn't return to pre-war levels until the mid-1950s. By 1952, when Elizabeth II came to the throne, inflation was running over 10%, partly due to the Korean War commodity boom. In this economic environment, the Regal's value proposition was compelling. £5 annual road tax versus potentially £30 or £40 for a car, motorcycle license versus car license, costs and testing fees, 50 miles per gallon versus maybe 25 or 30 for a small car. Insurance costs were lower. Maintenance was simpler and cheaper. Every aspect of ownership cost less. British Prime Minister Harold Macmillan famously said in 1957, "Most of our people have never had it so good." This was the beginning of British prosperity after the austerity years, but good was relative. Working-class families still needed affordable transportation. The Regal provided exactly that. Compare the Regal to contemporary British cars. A Morris Minor cost substantially more to purchase and operate. An Austin A30 was beyond many family budgets. Even the tiny Austin A30 with its 28 horsepower engine cost more to buy, license and operate than a Regal. For families on tight budgets, the choice was clear: Regal or no car at all. The three-wheel motorcycle classification loophole Reliant exploited wasn't an accident. It was tax policy designed to support a struggling motorcycle industry by encouraging small vehicle development. Reliant simply executed the concept better than anyone else. They built a real car, not a motorcycle with a body kit, that technically qualified for motorcycle status. That's not cheating. That's brilliant engineering within regulatory constraints. The beginning of the end. By the late 1960s, the world was changing. British prosperity was increasing. More families could afford real cars. The motorcycle license loophole that made the Regal attractive was becoming less relevant as more young people went directly to car licenses. The Regal's compromises, the three wheels, the modest performance, the tippy handling, became harder to justify as alternatives became affordable. In 1973, Reliant replaced the Regal with the Robin. The Robin was essentially an updated Regal with refined styling and improved stability from a rear anti-roll bar. But the fundamental concept remained: lightweight three-wheeler exploiting the motorcycle classification loophole. The Robin continued production until 2001, demonstrating that the market for these vehicles persisted far longer than anyone might have predicted. The Regal's final years saw production declining as the 3/30 variant wound down. By the time the last one rolled off the line in 1973, the automotive world had moved on. The energy crisis of the 70s would briefly make fuel economy fashionable again, but by then, better solutions existed. Small front-wheel drive cars like the Mini and later the VW Golf offered genuine car performance with nearly Regal-like economy. So what do we make of the Reliant Regal? It's easy to dismiss it as a curiosity, a rolling joke that tipped over and powered by an engine that would embarrass a lawn tractor. But that misses the point entirely. The Reliant Regal was exactly what it needed to be, when it needed to be it. It provided affordable, practical transportation to thousands of British families who otherwise couldn't afford any car at all. It exploited regulatory advantages intelligently. It pioneered fiberglass automotive construction techniques that would later become mainstream. It proved that simple, reliable engineering could outlast more sophisticated but less practical competitors. 16 horsepower, 3 wheels, 50 miles per gallon, 20 years of continuous production, 50,000 units sold. Those are the facts. But the real story is about innovation born from limitation, about engineering that serves real human needs rather than chasing specifications, about a company that found its niche and served it faithfully. The next time you're at a car show surrounded by chrome and horsepower, think about the Reliant Regal. Think about the millions of miles those little three-wheelers covered on British roads. Think about the families they transported, the businesses they supported, the cultural impact they achieved, despite or because of their oddity. Because here's the truth, automotive history isn't just about the fastest, the most powerful, the most glamorous. Sometimes it's about the humble vehicles that simply did their jobs. day after day, year after year, serving people who just needed to get from here to there without going bankrupt in the process. The Reliant Regal did exactly that. And for 20 years, against all conventional wisdom, it succeeded. Now, I want to hear from you. Did you ever encounter a Reliant Regal, maybe during travels to Britain? Maybe you knew someone who owned one. Share your stories in the comments. And if you've enjoyed this dive into an unusual corner of automotive history, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button, like this video, share it with anyone who appreciates engineering ingenuity, British eccentricity, or just good stories about humble vehicles that changed lives. Thank you for watching. Until next time, remember, sometimes the most interesting stories aren't about the cars that had everything, but about the ones that made the most of what they had.